One of the Cabinet's leading Brexiteers has suggested that voters can use the next general election to have their say on a final deal with the European Union and to force a future government to change course if they don't like what's been agreed. The Environment Secretary Michael Gove makes his comments in the Daily Telegraph, a day after Theresa May's agreement in Brussels cleared the way for trade talks. The Cabinet is expected to meet in the next fortnight to discuss Britain's future relationship with the European Union. Well, this was the reaction of Andrea Leadsom, the leader of the House of Commons and a prominent Leave campaigner, when she spoke to the Today programme on Radio 4 a little earlier.
Sovereign governments are always in a position to undertake and then subsequently to make different arrangements should the will of the people be that they do that. I don't really see that this is getting us anywhere. It is the case in a sovereign parliament that the voters can choose to take a country in a different direction.
Speaking on the same programme, the former Conservative leader and Leave supporter Ian Duncan-Smith said regulatory alignment between the UK and the EU once Britain left did not necessarily mean the same as having the regulations identical to the EU.
The regulations may be different, but the effect is important, and I think this is the key bit. What is the effect of what you do? That is in our interest, generally, even after a trade arrangement, to ensure that between our major trading partners, there is a sense of alignment. I don't really think that that is the key. The key here is the next phase. What will happen on the trade discussions? And I think this is going to be the bruising, difficult bit, but it's the vital bit.
Ian Duncan-Smith there. Well, let's speak to the former Conservative Party co-chairman Grant Shapps. He joins us from webcam in his constituency in Hertfordshire. Mr Shapps, good morning. Thanks for being with us on BBC News. Let me ask you, first of all, what's your take on the agreement that Mrs May reached with the EU in the early hours of yesterday morning?
Well, the first thing is I've actually taken the time now to read the full 15-page agreement, and I have to say I think it looks like a pretty balanced affair, and I'd say that probably whether you were a Brexiteer or a Remainer. This looks to me to be a deal which has common sense written right through it, and you kind of almost wonder why it took the EU so long to come up with an agreement like this, but I'm actually reasonably reassured by it.
It's the reassurance in part because in sections of it, it's basically saying, look, we're going to need to come back to this. Trust us, we're going to look at this in more detail. We'll hammer out the final words in a few months' time.
Well, some of it is a classic fudge, something the EU is very capable of, but to be fair, so are we. I mean, if you actually look back at former agreements on, for example, the Good Friday Agreement, the 1998 agreement with Northern Ireland, you'll note it's full of fudges about the way that we operate, and there are already many differences and exceptions for Northern Ireland, and this seeks to do sort of nothing more extreme than that. But I think actually where I was a bit reassured is things like the continuance of the European Court of Justice, the ECJ. Actually, I think this is a significant win for the UK government. It does say that it will be optional, actually, whether the courts ask the ECJ after we leave, and then whether they take the ECJ's advice. And I think that's better than I think many people would have been expecting.
But for those who have strong views that the ECJ should no longer have any role in our affairs, even giving the option to British judges to refer it to the court will be a hard compromise to swallow, and they will say that is some way away from the pretty clear statements that the Prime Minister made in the past that the European Court of Justice would no longer have any say.
Well, I don't think that's... I mean, leave it to the hardline Brexiteers to tell you whether they agree or not. They seem to be saying they're happy. But actually, when I read that document, it clearly says that the courts can but don't have to refer to the ECJ, and then they can but don't have to accept what the ECJ says. And in any case, that whole process it will time out anyway after 8 years. So if you're a Brexiteer and you want to leave, that looks reasonably good. I thought the money side of it kind of made sense. It says we'll carry on paying till 2019 March. Well, we don't leave till then, and then we'll pay till the end of 2020. Well, we're looking for a transition period, and it seems to me at the better end of I think what people would have worried about. So I actually think the government's done pretty well on this, and I was kind of surprised and pleased to see the outcome yesterday morning. It does mean there's a little bit of stability going forward for business and also for EU citizens living here and Brits living abroad, which had become a very contentious issue up until now.
Does it mean that you no longer want Theresa May to leave Downing Street?
Well, look, unlike others, I've been very clear about my views, but I don't see any point in hammering on about them every day. And actually, credit where credit's due. This is a sensible deal, and if we can now follow that through in the further negotiations with Europe, then that's good for Britain. In the end, that's what's mattered. That's what matters. And my views haven't changed, but I put them on record. I've been completely open about them. It's for others to decide. And in the meantime, let's get on with getting the best possible deal for Britain. And, as I say, credit where credit's due, this is a good start.
And what about Michael Gove's observation in the Telegraph today that if people don't like this, that's fine, they can vote the Tories out at the next election? I mean, that would mean a Jeremy Corbyn government, presumably, if the current balance of the House were to change in Labour's favour. It might be a minority government, but it wouldn't be a Conservative government. How would that be reopened by the option of a generation? I mean, in what way is it possible for voters? They can get you out, but they can't really change a deal that's already been done, can they?
Well, I saw what Michael was saying in the paper. I don't think there was anything particularly remarkable or surprising about it. I mean, in every election, it's the ability for the electorate to boot the government out, and clearly the electorate will make a bunch of decisions about not only things in the past, like in this example, the Brexit deal that's been negotiated, but also what parties are promising to do, pledging to do in the future. So it doesn't seem to me to be that surprising to say it will in part be a referendum about this. But I have to say, actually, on balance, going forward, what people will be interested in is, what's the health service looking like? Are the schools delivering better education? Are we building homes? All the usual stuff. And so I suspect the next election, just like the 2015 one that I was involved in winning, the 2017 one, like every election in the past, are always a referendum, not only on what you've done in the past, but a referendum on your manifesto for the future. And next election in 2022 presumably will be no different, and people will take a view overall rather than on one specific issue, even an issue as big as Brexit.
I appreciate that point, but just in terms of this reassurance that he appears to be offering, presumably on behalf of the government, that don't worry, if you don't like this, you can get something better or different in whatever way you don't like it if you vote a particular way in the general election. It's kind of not true, is it? Because the deal will have been done, the Brexit deal will have been done, will have left the EU. Not only that, the transition will have happened, but there will by then hopefully be a trade deal between Britain and the EU, and we can't just unilaterally tear that up.
Well, look, it's absolutely true what Michael said, in the same way as it was true that if you voted back now in 2015 for a party offering a referendum, you might get a referendum, and the outcome of that referendum might mean you leave Europe. Of course it will be true in 2022 that if the only thing that drives you is you want another referendum and another decision about Europe and taking Britain in yet another decision, then a party can offer that at the 2022 election. I suspect that's exactly what the Lib Dems will do to preempt their manifesto. But if you believe that actually we've got to a settled position and a pretty good deal for Britain, and I very much hope that's where we'll end up with, and I think the signs from yesterday's deal were encouraging in that nature, then you'll vote for parties with visions for the future about all sorts of other things which go well beyond Brexit. So of course what he said is true, but I mean it's only true in the same way as you always get an option at an election. You can vote for who you like.
Next election, we're already started to talk about it. Grant Shapps, former Conservative Party co-chairman. Real pleasure to speak to you again. Thanks so much for being with us on BBC News this morning. Well, listening to that, Jonathan Bake, our political correspondent. I mean, it's a perfectly reasonable point he's making, isn't it? That actually all governments, if you don't like what they do, you chuck them out, and then the next lot can come in and change the agreements. But that presumes that the EU would be willing to change whatever agreement we get up with. I suppose, in a sense, we're getting beyond ourselves. We've still got to get the agreement.
I think we are. We've got to have the agreement, and there would have to be an election. And as you say, at the moment, that's a few years away. But yes, the point that Grant Shapps was responding to there is what Michael Gove has said this morning, is that, as many are pointing out, that he's stating the obvious. If we don't like the terms of the deal, purely by definition, because we've left the European Union, we will be able to change it. Obviously, that's we can't do it on our own. We'd have to do that through a negotiating process with the European Union. But I think what Michael Gove was doing in that article was using Brexit as a case in point to demonstrate that we are, as he would put it, and Brexiteers put it, taking back control. Interesting, I think, to hear Grant Shapps describing this agreement as balanced. That perhaps demonstrates that it is suitably vague as to provide, the government with
Well, he used
a
the F word,
self-proclaimed
fudge.
victory.
So.
Fudge, yeah. And
He's not the first to have said that this week.
And that's how others will describe it. I think important as it is, the agreement that's been reached between the UK and Brussels at this point is perhaps something of a stopgap. It's there on page 1, under the caveat that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, ... And I think it's important to remember that. There are some big issues which have been worked out here, but it's lacking in detail in a lot of areas, and the real work is yet to come.
Jonathan Blake, our political correspondent, thank you very much. This